May 12, 2004. It was Carrie Mullen's 10th birthday. The morning light streamed through the kitchen window as she sat at the table, tracing patterns in the pancake syrup with her fork. Her mother, Dana Mullins, 35, hummed softly as she wrapped a small box in shimmering blue paper, Carrie's favorite color. "We're going to have the best day," Dana said, her eyes crinkling at the corners when she smiled. "Cake, balloons, and the lake. Just like I promised. Can we get ice cream too?" Carrie asked, hope brightening her features. Dana tucked a strand of her honey blonde hair behind her ear. "Of course we can." But Dana never showed up to pick Carrie up from school that afternoon. When the final bell rang at 3:15 p.m., Carrie stood alone on the sidewalk, watching as one by one, her classmates disappeared into waiting cars or walked home in laughing groups. By 3:30, she was the only child left, shifting nervously from foot to foot as Mrs. Peterson, her science teacher, waited with her, checking her watch with increasing frequency. At 3:45 p.m., Carrie's grandmother, Eleanor Mullins, called the police after driving to the school herself to find her granddaughter sitting on a bench, tears streaming down her face. Eleanor's hands shook as she dialed, her voice cracking when she told the dispatcher that her daughter-in-law was missing. "This isn't like Dana," she insisted. "Not today of all days." Officer Patrick Reese arrived at Dana's modest two-bedroom home on Willow Street in Fairgrove, Wisconsin 20 minutes later. Dana's silver Honda Civic was parked in the driveway, its engine cold to the touch. Inside the house, her purse sat on the kitchen counter, wallet intact with $43 in cash and all her credit cards present. Her cell phone was plugged into its charger on the nightstand. The back door was unlocked, which Eleanor said was unusual. Dana was always careful about locking up, she told Officer Reese, wringing her hands. Especially after Tom left. Dana was gone. The house was undisturbed, bed neatly made, breakfast dishes washed and put away, a half cup of coffee sitting on the counter, its surface glazed over with a thin film. No signs of a break-in, no struggle. Just silence and the faint smell of Dana's vanilla perfume hanging in the air. Detective Mara Whitaker was assigned to the case the next morning when Dana failed to turn up. Standing in Dana's bedroom, she surveyed the scene with practiced eyes. The alarm clock was set for 6 a.m. A dog-eared paperback novel lay on the nightstand. A framed photo of Dana and Carrie at the state fair last summer sat on the dresser, both of them smiling with cotton candy in their hands. Who was Dana Mullins? Whitaker murmured to herself. The picture that emerged was of a woman who had rebuilt her life methodically after divorce. Dana had worked as a veterinary assistant at Fairgrove Animal Clinic for 8 years. Divorced from Tom Mullins 3 years prior, she was described by colleagues and friends as quiet, dependable, and devoted to her daughter. She and Carrie lived alone in the small house she'd gotten in the divorce settlement. Her life was orderly, predictable. Until it wasn't. Tom Mullins was immediately questioned. 6'2" with a linebacker's build gone slightly soft with middle age, he worked construction in the next county over. The divorce had been his idea, though Dana had filed the papers. According to mutual friends, he'd moved on quickly, dating a series of women from neighboring towns. He claimed he hadn't spoken to Dana in over a week. "We keep it civil for Carrie's sake," he told Detective Whitaker, his large hands fidgeting with his car keys. "I pay my child support on time. Dana and I text about Carrie's schedule. That's about it." His alibi initially checked out, he was on a fishing trip with 3 coworkers at Lake Wissota, a 2-hour drive north. The men corroborated his story, saying they'd left Friday afternoon and returned late Sunday night. "We were at the cabin all weekend," said Jeff Larson, Tom's foreman. "Cards, fishing, beers. Tom was there the whole time." But one of them, when pressed years later, admitted the truth during a routine follow-up interview. "We never saw Tom after that first night," Mike Denton confessed, unable to meet Detective Whitaker's eyes. "He said he wasn't feeling well, went to bed early. In the morning, his truck was gone. He came back Sunday evening, said he'd gone for supplies in town. We covered for him because, well, he's our boss. But that revelation was years away. In the immediate aftermath of Dana's disappearance, searches began across Fairgrove and the surrounding woods. Volunteers combed the nearby lake shore and hiking trails. Dana's photo appeared on local news, then state news. A tip line was established. A neighbor 3 houses down, Mrs. Adelaide Potter, called the tip line on the 3rd day. "I couldn't sleep that night," the elderly woman said, nervously twisting her wedding band. "My arthritis was acting up. I was sitting by my front window around 2 a.m., and I saw a dark SUV, I think it was navy blue or maybe black, idling in front of Dana's house for about 10 minutes. The plates were covered in mud. Couldn't read a thing. The driver was a clean-cut man, maybe in his 40s, wearing a baseball cap. I didn't think much of it then. People come and go at all hours these days." Officers canvassed the neighborhood again, but no one else had seen the SUV. The tip went nowhere. Detective Whitaker methodically interviewed everyone in Dana's life, building a timeline of her final known movements. The last person to see her was the mailman, who'd waved to her at 11:30 a.m. as she put something in her mailbox, the birthday card for Carrie that arrived at her grandmother's house the next day. One friend's account stood out. Marla Jensen, Dana's closest friend since high school, revealed something troubling during her second interview. Dana had been incredibly anxious lately, Marla said, her fingers nervously shredding a tissue in her lap. About 3 weeks before she disappeared, she started acting strange. Jumpy. Looking over her shoulder. Did she say why? Whitaker asked. Marla nodded. She believed someone had been in her house while she was gone. She told me, "I come home and the window's open. The lamps moved. I'm not imagining it, Marla." She was thinking about getting a security system, but... She trailed off, tears welling in her eyes. Did she mention anyone specific? Someone who might want to harm her? No, but... Marla hesitated. About a year ago, there was this client at the vet clinic. Really intense guy who kept bringing in his dog for minor things. Dr. Hoffman eventually suggested he might be overreacting. The guy blew up, started yelling at Dana when she tried to calm him down. She was shaken up about it, but I don't think she ever reported it. Do you remember his name? Marla shook her head. Something with an R, I think. Ryan? Rayner? I'm not sure. The investigation stalled. Months passed with no solid leads. Dana's case file grew thin, moved further down the priority stack as new cases demanded attention. Carrie went to live with her grandmother. Tom Mullins moved to Minnesota with a new girlfriend. Life in Fairgrove continued, though people still lowered their voices when they spoke about the woman who vanished on her daughter's birthday. Detective Whitaker couldn't let it go. On her own time, she pored over the case files, looking for something, anything, they might have missed. She visited the house once more before it was sold, standing in Dana's bedroom, trying to see what Dana might have seen in her final moments there. "What happened to you?" she whispered to the empty room. In 2011, 7 years after Dana's disappearance, a construction crew renovating an abandoned farmhouse 12 miles outside town made a grisly discovery. While tearing up floorboards in what had once been a pantry, worker Miguel Sanchez noticed one board that didn't match the others. Beneath it was a hollow space, about 3 feet deep. "I thought maybe it was a root cellar or something," Sanchez later told police. "Then I saw the bag. Inside the black duffel bag, zipped shut and wrapped in plastic, bones, decomposed clothing, and a plastic ID badge from Fairgrove Animal Clinic with Dana's smiling face." Detective Whitaker, now a lieutenant, rushed to the scene. Standing in the dilapidated farmhouse, surrounded by the smell of mold and decay, she felt a surge of conflicting emotions, vindication that she'd been right to keep searching, and deep sorrow that Dana would never come home alive. The autopsy was inconclusive. No obvious signs of trauma to the skeletal remains. No skull fractures, no broken bones. But the forensic anthropologist noted something disturbing: marks on the wrist bones consistent with binding, likely with zip ties. Dana had been restrained before her death. Can you determine cause of death? Whitaker asked Dr. Freeman, the forensic anthropologist. He shook his head. With remains in this condition, it's difficult. No obvious trauma. Could have been smothering, poisoning, strangulation that didn't break the hyoid bone. What I can tell you is that she died with her hands bound. With new evidence in hand, Whitaker and her team re-examined the original case files, every interview, every tip, every dead end. In a file of dismissed leads, they found something that made Whitaker's blood run cold. In late 2003, Dana had filed a restraining order against a man named Keith Rayner, a former client at the vet clinic. The file was dismissed due to insufficient cause, and according to the report, Rayner had moved to Michigan shortly after. How did we miss this? Whitaker demanded, slamming the file down on her desk. The rookie officer who'd conducted the initial search of records looked stricken. It was filed under a different case number, he explained. The system didn't flag it because the restraining order was never granted. Whitaker immediately put out a search for Keith Rayner. It took 3 months to trace his movements after leaving Fairgrove. He'd moved first to Lansing, Michigan, then to a small town called Mercerville, where he'd purchased 3 acres of land and lived alone. But when police tracked him down in 2012, they discovered he'd died the year before in a single-car crash. His SUV had veered off a rural road and hit a tree. No alcohol in his system, no mechanical failure detected. The crash was ruled an accident. His house. Just 6 miles from the farmhouse where Dana's remains were found. It can't be a coincidence, Whitaker insisted to the county prosecutor. Rayner stalked her, killed her, buried her, then lived just miles away from her grave for years. It's circumstantial at best, the prosecutor replied, unmoved. The man's dead. We can't question him, can't get a warrant for his property. Without more evidence, I can't file charges posthumously. The investigation stalled once more. Whitaker kept digging, but leads grew cold. DNA evidence from the duffel bag was degraded beyond use. No fingerprints survived. The farmhouse had changed hands multiple times since 2004, with no records of who might have had access to it when Dana disappeared. Carrie Mullins grew up with a shadow over her life, the shadow of not knowing. Every birthday was a reminder of loss. She graduated high school, then college, carrying her mother's memory like a stone in her pocket, smooth from constant touching but still heavy. The final twist came in 2019, when Carrie, now 25, was cleaning out her grandmother's house after Eleanor passed away. In an old jewelry box that had belonged to Dana, hidden beneath a false bottom, she found a sealed envelope. Inside was a handwritten note, dated 2 weeks before her disappearance. If anything happens to me, it's not an accident. I've seen the SUV again. Tell Carrie I did my best. I love her more than anything. D. With shaking hands, Carrie called Detective Whitaker, now Captain Whitaker, who came immediately. She knew, Carrie said, tears streaming down her face. She knew something was going to happen. Whitaker studied the note, heart heavy. This confirms what we suspected about Rayner. The SUV matches Mrs. Potter's description. But why? Why would he target my mom? Some stalkers develop fixations that don't make sense to anyone else, Whitaker explained gently. From what we could piece together, he became obsessed with your mother after she helped calm his dog during a procedure. He started bringing the animal in for imaginary ailments just to see her. When the clinic limited his visits, he began watching her elsewhere. Despite the emotional weight of the letter and its clear implications, prosecutors said it wasn't enough to reopen charges against Rayner or anyone else. The handwriting was verified as Dana's, but without more evidence linking Rayner directly to her disappearance and death, the case remained in limbo. Dana's case remains officially unsolved. The file sits in Captain Whitaker's office, never quite closed. On her birthday each year, Carrie leaves a single candle outside the front step of their old house, now occupied by a young family who know nothing of its history. The porch light, long burned out, still flickers faintly when the wind moves the wires just right, a ghost of electricity, a memory of illumination, a reminder that some mysteries cast long shadows. Tom Mullins returned to Fairgrove in 2020, his face lined with years and regret. He approached Carrie after Eleanor's funeral. "I've never stopped wondering," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Did they ever figure out what happened to your mom?" Carrie studied her father's face carefully. "No," she said. "They never did." And in that moment, watching his eyes, she wondered, not for the first time, what secrets he might be keeping. The timeline of the fishing trip had never added up. His truck, gone the morning after Dana disappeared. The mud that Mrs. Potter had mentioned on the SUV's license plate. Coincidences, perhaps. Or something more. As she walked away from him, Carrie felt the weight of her mother's note in her pocket. Some questions have no clear answers. Some mysteries remain unsolved not because the truth is hidden, but because we're afraid to face what we might find when we look closely enough. In her apartment that night, Carrie opened a fresh notebook and began to write down everything she remembered about her mother, about that day, about the years that followed. Maybe the answer was there, in the spaces between what was said and what was left unspoken. Maybe it was time to look again, with adult eyes, at the mystery that had shaped her life. Or maybe some secrets are meant to stay buried, like bones beneath a false floorboard, waiting for the right moment to tell their story.